This is a video tutorial on how to make the Billie bucket hat by Happy Days. You'll need fabric for the lining, fabric for the outer and a heat erasable pen. And this is how you make it. You will need to cut out a brim in your outer, a brim in your lining, a crown piece in your outer, a crown piece in your lining and a top piece in your lining and a top piece in your outer fabric. We'll start by making the crown. Take your crown outer fabric and fold right sides together, line up all the edges and press. Then put some clips in. And do the same for the lining. Right sides together again, line up all your edges and pop some clips in. I'll pop some clips in and now I'm going to take it over the sewing machine and use 1/4 inch seam allowance, or the width of your sewing foot is a good guide, and sew all along there and all along there. I've sewn 1/4 inch seam allowance along the lining and the outer crown pieces, and now I'm going to do the same for the brim. Now I've got the lining of the brim and the outer of the brim, and as we did before for the crown, fold the fabric in half, right sides together, match up all the sides and edges and pop some clips in, and do exactly the same for the outer. And pop a few clips in. Once you pop some clips in, as before, we take it over to the sewing machine and sew 1/4 inch seam allowance across the ends. It's very important that you keep to 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've sewn using 1/4 inch seam allowance on both of the brims. The next stage is marking your crease lines. Take your crown piece, in this case I'm using the lining, and press once again the line that you pressed earlier, then open up and using this centre crease line and taking your crown piece which you've sewn, and you've also got a crease line along here from where you folded it, open it out and using that crease line and your seam line there, line up and make sure it's lined up at the top as well, and then press and press your seams open. This is so we'll get some markings for lining up later. Then take your heat erasable pen and on each crease, bottom of each crease line, make a mark with your pen, top and bottom. And you'll end up looking something like that. And repeat this for all the other 3 pieces. I've marked the creases on all 4 pieces And I'm going to put those to one side a moment while I work on the top piece. Now we're working on the top piece. Take your top piece lining and fold in half, right sides together, and press. Open out and then take the other side and press. Open out, and as we did before, mark with your pen on each of the crease lines, and repeat that for the outer top. We're now going to attach the top piece to the crown. Place your crown fabric the wrong side up, so this is the back of your fabric, and take your crown piece, your top piece, that's the wrong side again, and using the marks that you made in the creases, open out and carefully match that line and that line together. Pop a clip in. Then slowly work your way around and take your next mark and you mark on the crown, and once again line them up and pop a clip in. Carry on round. And you place this mark on the centre of your seam that you sewed. So place that on there. And then the final clip is your final marks you've made. And they should all fit perfectly. Once you've popped your 4 main clips in, line up the top edges. You have to take your time with this to make sure that they all match up neatly. And then add an additional clip in between the 2 that you've put in. You could use pins if you prefer. Some people prefer pins. And the last one, there. So you've got it all clipped neatly all the way around. And now we're going to take it over to the sewing machine and we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Sew carefully all the way around the circle, joining the top to the crown. I've sewn all the way around, and now I'm going to do exactly the same for the outer. I've clipped the top piece onto the crown outer as I did before, and as I did before I'm going to take it over the sewing machine and use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Sew all the way around. I've sewn all the way around attaching the top to the crown, and I've done the same on the lining. And now we're going to attach the brim. Take the brim lining piece and using that seam and that seam, right sides together, line up your centre seam on both pieces and add a clip. Next, carefully turn it round and find your next mark, and again right sides together, line up your marks and add a clip. And carry on round, finding your mark, and we're doing this exactly the same as we did before. I've added some more clips as I did before, and now I'm going to take it over the sewing machine and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, join the brim to the crown lining. Take your time with this. I've joined the brim to the crown, lining up the centre line, and that's your hat lining finished for now, and we'll put it to one side. We're now working on the outer of the bag, and as we did for the lining, ensure that your brim and your crown centre seams line up, and put a clip in, and put a clip on the other marks we made, and then add centre clips all the way around. And next, take it over the sewing machine and use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, join the brim to the crown all the way around, and once again take your time. I've joined the brim to the crown, ensuring that the centre all lines up, and now I'm going to turn it the right way around. I've turned the outer the right way, and I've left the lining turned the wrong way, and now I'm going to put this lining on top of the outer, ensuring that the centre seams on the lining and the outer match up. I've clipped the seams together, and as you can see, it's the pretty sides are together. Next, find your mark you made and the other mark on the lining, and as we did before, clip together, and carry on doing that on the other two marks. I've added the 4 clips to the marks on the bottom of the brim, and as we did before, I'm going to place some more clips just to secure it a bit more all the way around, making sure as you go along that the edges all line up. I popped all the clips in, and as you can see, I've left a gap there for turning later. I'm now going to take it over to the sewing machine, and again using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, sew all the way around, and this will join the outer to the lining, remembering to leave a gap for turning. I've sewn all the way around the brim, joining the lining to the outer, and I've remembered to leave a gap, and I'm going to turn it the right way around now through the gap I left. I've turned it the right way around, and now I'm going to take it over to the iron and I'm going to press so the seams all line up neatly and ensure that the seam allowance for the gap is folded in. I've turned it the right way and I've pushed out all the edges and I've pressed it and I've ensured that the gap is turned in correctly for the right seam allowance, and I've added some clips, and now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and sew fairly close to the edge so it closes up this gap. Sew all the way around. I've sewn all the way around close to the edge, and this has sealed up the gap. Using that first row of stitches as a guide, move in 1/4 inch or the width of your sewing foot and sew another circle all the way around and stop. I've sewn the second row of stitches. I'm now going to move in the same amount again, sew all the way around again and stop. I'm then going to repeat this process until the brim is finished. I've completed all the rows of stitches, and that's your Billie bucket hat all finished. It is reversible. This is the one way and this is the other way.